avant-garde.
All right, welcome to Torture Garden. I'm Scoot,
I'm Jimmy.
and this is the moment you've all been waiting for. However many of you there are,
all three.
all three of you. It is our album of the year, Jimmy and Scoot Extravaganza Palooza Hurrah. Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously this is something that anyone who talks about music, they're expected to do this. We decided we were going to do something a little bit more just informal, just mainly we want to list off what our picks were. Obviously they'll be in the description box as well, so you can take a look at that, but mainly we just wanted to use that as a launching point to talk about the year, talk about new music, and then obviously touch on the albums we picked. But yeah, and then needless to say, at the end of this video in the comments, please comment your list. We'd love to see what albums you really enjoyed this year. Maybe get some good recommendations from us, and then we'll get some good recommendations from you.
Yeah. Also, unnumbered, because we just, I think both of us, we just can't stand numbering music.
Yeah, that's always been something. It's always been something that I think it's interesting to see who. Like for example, I think for a top 10, it's interesting for like a blog that numbers their stuff. But after a while, like, which one is it? I think Metal Hammer in the UK. They had a top 100, and at that point, how do you order that? Like, how do you specifically?
I think for if we're talking about the entire magazine, like
they probably did an aggregate of some kind.
Exactly.
But like, that begs the question, did they just have, everyone submit a top 50 and then they just included 100 albums? So, yeah, just to speak to Jimmy's point, like, at that point, it just doesn't make sense to number it because, like, my top 50 for the year, or however many I end up, compiling, it's just so many different genres and so many different types of albums in terms of length, in terms of mood. It just feels weird to say, this album ranks higher than this album. And it could be ranked for your enjoyment, but still, like, I enjoy different albums for different reasons. So
exactly. So why don't you go first, Scoots?
Sure. So let me just get it up on the screen. So again, just alphabetical order. I will list off, the album, band name, album name, and then also just kind of give a brief genre description. So first is Bell Witch, Mirror Reaper off Profound Lore Records. It's a one long, 80-minute funeral doom track, really, well composed and engaging despite its length. Next is Bestia Arcana, Holókauston. They are a very well composed atmospheric black metal group. The mastermind, I forget his name. He's also in a lot of other black metal projects.
What was that other one that came out with him?
Achilles came out in 2015, and then also Nightbringer came out this year. I think he's probably most known for Nightbringer. I think that's where he got his attention. Excuse me. But I think Bestia Arcana is perhaps the best of the three, and this is just an excellent. I think the last album he put out came out quite a while ago, and finally he came out with another one, and it's just as good. XI, self-titled. It's led by Mike Fox, I forget, from Liturgy on drums, and
Colin Stetson
on saxophone. Yeah, I forgot that. And it's a very interesting, unique kind of mix. It's slightly avant-garde metal, and then post-metal, and different weird elements that really come together. It's very, very, it's very interesting. It's a little bit short, but for what it is, I'm looking forward to what they're doing, and I think this is an exceptional start. Father John Misty, pure comedy. I mean, I've been a big Father John Misty fan for a while now, and I think this is an interesting direction based on his last project, but very, very well composed per usual. Love his singing, love the lyrics, love the music. He's just a great composer all around. Next, Forest Swords, Compassion. I've loved this guy since Engravings, that came out I think about 4 years ago, and this is a bit more diverse and dynamic from his previous album. It's that sophomore follow up that really takes everything they did and does it better, which is my favorite type of sophomore album, where they don't necessarily try to do something completely different or just tread the same thing. They just do, what they do well and then reach a bit further. And I love that he did that. This is probably the biggest surprise of the year. I didn't expect this album at all. It's Irreversible Entanglements, and the self-titled. It's free jazz, spoken word poetry, jazz poetry.
All right.
Very, very topical poetry. And the vocalist, I forget her name, but she is also, and she's well known. She does poetry, spoken word stuff. She also does a project called More Mother, which is poetry and kind of power electronics, death industrial.
Oh, that sounds cool.
That album came out last year. Yeah, it's really, really good. And because when I heard it, I was like, this sounds familiar. Like, why I've heard this voice before, and it's that's who she was. It's really caught me off guard. Not only did I not expect to hear a release like this year, but I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, and it's really, really well done. Next, Merkabah, Million Miles. This is interesting because they have been teasing a new album for months upon months now, and then suddenly they announced it like early November, like, yep, it's coming out this month, and then it just dropped, and it's phenomenal. It's probably, I would say, this does what XI does except better, and they've had more time to refine it too, but it's saxophone, really saxophone heavy, rock and metal, a lot of fusion of avant-garde rock, prog rock, and then noise rock. There's a lot of good things going on, and it's very, very interesting how they're able to develop their compositions and really go in a really, really interesting direction with a lot of things that you wouldn't expect to go together well. I had to include a hip-hop album. I didn't listen to a lot of hip-hop this year, but far and away my favorite was Oddisee, the Iceberg. This was an album that on first listen I was curious because I was like, these beats sound really organic, and it turns out he recorded most, if not all of them, with a live backing band, which was really, really cool. So it has the benefit, like all the power of jazz rap, but has that the fluidity of being organic performances and instrumentation. Per usual, Oddisee is great at doing conscious rap that flows and has a lot of it's actually catchy. Like, a lot of conscious rappers sometimes are a little too intense and heady, and like it's just not fun to listen to. Oddisee's flow is so smooth and so engaging and so catchy. I love this project. Two left. Second to last is Saint Vincent, Masseduction. This was a weird one because she went in a completely different. She'd been kind of slightly going towards. She'd been ascending in a specific way, going from kind of nice art pop, chamber pop, and slowly taking on more elements of the Talking Heads, weirdisms, to get to that really kind of experimental art rock. And you could see the progression. This new album really goes off into a slightly more straightforward pop direction, and I think she pulled it off really well. I think. It wasn't what I expected, but I think it still ended up being a really, really solid release, and I've come back to it many times. And I think just enjoying it for what it is and not expecting her to have followed up what she'd been doing, with her self-titled and then Strange Mercy, really helped me to appreciate that she really did come out with a great album. And just to enjoy it for what it is, there's so much to appreciate here. Just a really, really great art pop record with still that nice fiery, guitar-heavy sound she's she's been known for. And last but not least, kind of like I was telling Jimmy before, I listened to a lot of death metal and black metal this year, and Bestia Arcana was my favorite black metal album of the year, and it was really hard because there was so much good death metal this year I loved, but this one was just very unique and interesting, and I really, really loved it a lot all the way through and listened to it many, many times, and it just did something new with the genre. I like death metal kind of has an established formula in its many subgenres. So this album, which is Succumb, the self-titled album by Succumb, it was kind of weird because the Flenser signed them. The Flenser is not known for doing like death metal, like traditional metal stuff. And so I was interested, and they fuse, it's blackened death metal kind of, but also a little bit more like that Incantation, Portal kind of grimy death metal, but then there's also a lot of punk and like hardcore energy behind it. So it really caught me off guard. You know, there was a lot of great death metal this year, but I just kept finding myself returning to this because of how differently they approached the genre and how just fun it was to listen to. It was just a really engaging, fun, youthful take on death metal, and that's, you know, it's kind of a self-serious genre, so it was nice to hear people really making enjoyable music with it. And that's my top 10.
Got some good picks there, man.
Thank you.
There's some I definitely want to talk to you about.
Great.
But so for me, alphabetical order again. Angles 9, Disappeared Behind the Sun. It's sort of like an avant-garde jazz album, sort of like free jazz, but I think there's some composition behind it. It's a little bit of a big band type of thing. I thought it was a really cool album because it's very like it's more approachable than listening to I was thinking about doing one of Peter Brotzmann's live albums in that slot, but I felt that this was it was very unique, and just in the way that they delivered on their stuff. I can't say it's my favorite out of the year. I mean, I don't think any of these really not one of them really goes above the other. Hence why we didn't number them.
Yeah.
Because there were some times that I listened to this, I was like, okay, but then other times I'd be like, holy shit! Like it was like one of those mood dependency type ones.
Sure.
But I really enjoyed that. Burning Ghosts Reclamation. I fucking love this album. I mean, if I was still writing for Heavy Blog, this would probably be album of the year for me. Oh my god, it's like, yeah, it's like, again, like more like avant-garde jazz, but it's there's a lot more composition behind it this time around from Burning Ghost's other album, which was like basically all improvised, and it was cool that like they managed to put a lot of political themes into their music despite it being instrumental, but they made it in a way that it didn't feel forced. It felt very natural, and just Dan Rosenboom on trumpet is just the man's a virtuoso. Everybody in that band is really great at what they do. It's basically a rock lineup, but with the trumpet, and just that there's a lot of emotion in it. And I really enjoy that. It was a really cool Zadok release this year. Pan Daijing's Lack is next, which is sort of this weird improvised field recordings sort of mashup, I guess. She's a German performance artist, I think, and she I had never heard of her. I think I saw this on Tiny Mixtapes, and it sounded cool, so I gave it a shot. And it's really, really weird. Like she's dabbled in like noise and stuff like that before, and like power electronics and sort of stuff around that genre, and so you can hear bits of that, but there's also like some odd vocals. It's sort of like do you remember that Mike Patton album? Is it solo themes for voice? No, adult themes for voice.
Yep.
It's sort of like that, but it's like if Bjork did it.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Some parts because for a lot of it, it's just there's a lot of noisy parts that I think are just field recordings that she sort of fucked up. It was a cool pick. Golden Retrievers Rotations. I did not expect to love this album so much. It's sort of like minimalist music. It's and I think it's a duo that one plays piano or synth, and then the other one plays saxophone, if I remember. But I think they added in more instrumentation this time around, and they just created something like it's a short album, but it really there's a lot of emotional depth to it that I really, really grabbed onto a lot, and it was a really pleasant listen. Cameron Graves' Planetary Prince. I was very excited for this album this year because it's one of Kamasi Washington's from the was it the Get Down movement?
Yes.
Whatever his band name is. So Cameron Graves is the pianist from this band, and so Kamasi Washington is actually on this album, as well as I want to say Thundercat might be on this, but I'm not entirely sure. But so basically everybody from the Get Down movement is like on this thing, but it doesn't sound like Kamasi. Like it doesn't sound like Kamasi's thing, but it's cool that it's sort of similar in the way that Cameron Graves is taking a lot of jazz, stuff that had been evolved before in jazz, and then just fucking around with it. Like a lot of there's a very fusion sort of sound to the album, but it doesn't get saccharine. Like that was always my complaint with a lot of jazz fusion, is that it sounds really cheesy after a while. And this is not that at all. And then, not to mention, his piano playing is really interesting. He has this rhythmic ability that it's sort of like Thelonious Monk, almost. But he it's sort of like Horace Silver too. But at the same time, he mixes that with these his chord usage reminds me of like Herbie Hancock and like even Keith Jarrett to a point, but it's not as I don't find it as unbearable as Keith Jarrett. No offense to him. So it was a really it was a cool album that it shows that jazz is so far from dead. Just to have something like that show up. Next, Igloo Ghosts Neo Wax Bloom. This is like the weirdest album of the year, without a fucking doubt. Yeah, you're nodding your head.
Yeah.
It is. It's really odd. It's I was trying to think of a description for it. It's like if Venetian Snares and Flying Lotus had an orgy and invited like everybody from Warp and Brainfeeder to join in.
That's a good description.
Yeah, it's like just a lot of weirdness that and it's so like you really can't tell the tracks apart from each other, so it feels just like one like really long fucked up DJ mix in a way. And it's really enjoyable. Like it really kept my attention the entire time. And I didn't expect it to, and it was just just a really cool little electronic album. Iron Reagan's Crossover Ministry. This is probably the first album from this year that I like fell in love with. Like I liked Iron Reagan before, but I love this album. It was it was just I like the humor in it, and like even though there's a lot of political themes in it, like it's so satirical that you just can't help but laugh at it. Like just like the song "Fuck the Neighbors" is probably my favorite song of the entire year, like without a doubt. Just like the music video is just great. It's like the chorus is just like "fuck the neighbors, fuck their yard." Like it's just like it's so stupid and just funny and to listen to. But those are just the lyrics. Like it's really solid crossover thrash. Like it's just like really good. Let's see next. Muttersten's Carpet Clock. I'm hoping I say that right because I believe I want to say it's Swedish. It could be Norwegian. So they're a like a sort of electroacoustic improvisation sort of group. So it's a lot of like just quiet noises. That's the best way to describe it. It was just an odd little listen that I really fell for a lot. It's sort of I don't know. It's sort of like freeform ambient music.
Interesting.
Like, yeah.
That sounds cool.
It's a cool little thing. Rosetta's Utopioid. I've only listened to this a couple times. I've only listened to all of these like only a couple times this year because I've been just lazy, I guess. And but I'm a huge Rosetta fan. I mean, I have every album of theirs. And so this was such a weird left turn for them. It was like when you listen, like the first track sounds like almost like a dream pop album or like shoegaze, very shoegazy, which they definitely have a big shoegaze influence that you can hear on other albums, but it's very dreamy and laid back this time. And then like it goes like full throttle, but it's very like I really liked how they played around with their sound on this. And then final one, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who knows me, John Zorn's There Is No More Firmament. and I was debating whether to put this on or not. But when I was listening to it again, I'm like, this is really good. Like, because I've never like. I do enjoy Zorn's classical music, but I find it probably the most difficult to listen to, and this is not the case here. Like he has a lot of really interesting compositions. He plays around with trumpet, which is really it's sort of like a new thing for me to hear from him. So to hear like a couple of, like the opening is like a trumpet quartet, I believe, and. There's some really interesting ideas and stuff they use, and there's a piano trio composition that he does that it's essentially just he composes just for the piano, if I remember the liner notes right, that just the piano plays the composition and then the bass and the drums are improvising, and so they're basically trying to like upseat the piano in a way. It's a really cool album that
really interesting.
Yeah, like it has a lot of variety to it, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, and you're just like it's very, very interesting. So that was mine.
Sweet.
I'm still surprised that we didn't have any overlaps, but
I'm trying to think of where we might have had.
Leprous is Melina.
Yes, that was as I was telling Jimmy before we got on this. Leprous is a band that I really. It took a while for me to really appreciate just modern prog rock and prog metal in general. I don't know. For me, a lot of it was I didn't like the aesthetic. I didn't like a lot of that about it, and to me that kind of made. It kind of made the performances, because I think the performances there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, there's a lot of cheese and corniness that kind of comes with a lot of modern prog rock.
It's like the production. It's so just like silky smooth.
And and so I think for that it kind of exacerbated that, the fact the aesthetic was, sometimes the album art or the lyrics or the way delivery just it didn't vibe with me. It's not my typical type of aesthetic. But then I just thought I'd give Melina a try, because they've been someone a lot of people I know really love them. Interestingly enough, they didn't like this one as much.
I found that really funny.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But I just put it on, and it's just really well written. A lot of great choruses. I love Einar's vocals.
Oh my god,
I really enjoy everything. And honestly, from there, I just bought all of their stuff on CD, and I think it's all fantastic. It was a big surprise for me, because I never anticipated listening to them, let alone enjoying them, and I think that they're a fantastic band.
I didn't expect the album to be that good either, because I was never a Leprous fan. I don't really consider myself one now, but the album reminded me a lot of Tesseract's Altered States, but just a lot better than that album, and I really like that album. It was cool. I'm trying to think about Forest Swords would have been on mine. But because I listened to it a lot this year, but I don't know, I think it was it Danger? Is that one of the songs?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not really a track guy, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm never much help in that regard.
Oh no, it's Panic. Panic. That's what it was. The panic is on. Yeah, that whole thing. I really like that track, but I just felt like the direction, like it was a little repetitive after a while. Like it just felt
that's
like
kind of his thing. Yeah,
he was doing like the same thing over and over again. And thankfully, the stuff he makes is really groovy, and you don't mind hearing it over and over again. But I think I after getting I got his first album earlier this year, and I think I like Engravings a lot more. But Compassion's good, and let's see, what else did I check out? Succumb actually was really cool, but the vocals really, I really
like her vocals, but I can totally see them being.
It was like they were just drenched in reverb, like way too much for me, and it just it felt like that it was like a different. Like it was like if somebody else's vocals bled over onto this record, Which is sort of a shame because besides that, it sounded really cool. Same with XI. I'm really surprised that you liked XI because I remember I thought we talked about this earlier during the year that you were like sort of on the fence about it.
I think what surprised me and what was keeping me back from loving it initially is just I think I was disappointed that it wasn't longer. I think initially when I first heard it, this is why I really don't listen to lead singles as much anymore, because the first lead single was not the opening track, and I think that track didn't work. It's one of those albums that kind of builds on a mood throughout the whole project. I mean, there's only 4 tracks, but it's I think it's about a half hour. I forget which track it was. It just didn't flow as well on its own. I like how the first track creates the mood and then it evolves and then it does what it does with it, and that's really, I think that album was the last major album I was looking forward to that I listened to the lead single for, because once I kind of realized that, especially because a lot of bands release so many lead singles from their albums. It seems like they release even like, I'm trying to think of what band I was.
And Bjork released like 3 singles.
Bjork released quite a few. There was another one I was really looking forward to, and they released so many. I don't.
Didn't
recall.
Father John Misty release like a couple, like 3 or 4?
He did, and I stopped after a while for that reason, because it is interesting to get kind of a feel for what direction they're going when someone releases a lead single or 2. But once you get to 3, 4, like, or more, it's like, okay, well, I might as well just wait till the album. Like, I don't want to listen to. I think a good example of that is with Disclosure. They're a UK house band I really, really enjoy. And their last album, they released like 5 or 6 songs in advance, and then they turned out to be by far and away the best songs in the album. So then listening to the album as a whole, it was like, wow, this kind of sucks. Because all the songs I enjoy I've already heard before.
I think part of that is like a marketing thing. Like, there are some albums that are so successful that every single track becomes a release as a single. Like, like Thriller is a really good example of that. Mm-hmm. Well, I think almost everyone. I think there's like 1 track that isn't a single.
Yeah, but I think the vast majority of the songs.
The majority of. So, but I get you. I get you there.
I wanted to ask you, so did you, I mean, you obviously listened to, I assume, more than just this Zorn album this year.
What you mean in terms of Zorn's discography? Like that he released this year?
In terms of his new projects.
Yeah.
So how did you, was it difficult to pare down to just one, or?
So let me think, because I think There Is No More Firmament and The Garden of Earthly Delights that I think were the only 2 albums of his that came out this year that I bought. Because the next one that came after that was Midsummer Moons, which was I want to give it a try at some point, but didn't really seem up my alley. Like, it was more like a I don't even know, like it seemed like a pagan moon worshipping album. I wish I was joking, but like that's how the description said it. I'm like maybe it could be cool, but no. And then the other one was Interpretation of Dreams, which I just when it came out, I was in the middle of school, so I didn't really have any money to get it. I probably would have gotten it, but when I saw the description at first, I wasn't really enthused because sort of the lineup that he used during it is just pretty familiar after this point. There's like a vibraphone quintet or something like that, and I'm like, okay, like enough vibraphone, please. Or at least if you're going to use it differently, because I feel like he uses it very similarly like every single time. And maybe that's the player he has, because I'm pretty sure he uses Kenny Williamson for like most of his stuff now. But yeah, I really do want to try out that album. I probably will end up buying it when we go to like Loma's, just because why the fuck not? It's more Zorn, but yeah, that's pretty much why. Zadok's stuff is just so you can't find it. online. So you have to either
except through
you have to either pirate or you either have to pirate it or buy it, and I don't really like the former, and I don't really have the money to do the latter.
Yeah, because I think their CDs are usually around at least like 15 or so, or 13, 15.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah.
And I totally understand why it's that expensive, because it's not like Zadok is like this, like Relapse Records or like Atlantic Records. Like, it's not like they're a completely independent avant-garde music company based in the middle of fucking Manhattan. Like, you can only expect so much.
But
from them.
On the flip side, there's only so many times you can spend, 13, 15 bucks on an album.
I honestly, it's not really the price that bothers me, because I know that, if I buy something from Zadok, that it's going to be really interesting, and like, even if you don't end up loving it, it'll definitely challenge you.
Mm-hmm,
and
for sure.
So I definitely don't mind paying that, because lately I don't really buy a lot of music because I just financially am not able to.
Yeah.
So to get just like like I was listening to a lot of old Zorn stuff just over like the past couple months.
Mm-hmm.
And
actually, same here.
Yeah.
Just because like I'm in a similar boat with you. You want to watch my money. So for me, I'd rather when I set a certain amount I want to spend, and then I'll try to get my bang for my buck. I'd rather get as many CDs as I can within that bracket, rather than just get one album, because then that'll last me for a while. I'll listen to one CD for like most of the week and then switch and whatnot.
Yeah. I think with Zorn, for me, like that's I don't really care much for bang for buck, because I think his stuff is so dense that you could really keep listening to it over and over again. Because it's more like I think a lot of his stuff from like the last 5 years has been a little not a little samey, but I think when it comes to the lineup and arrangement, there are a lot of similarities that I just, considering the amount of stuff he puts out, I just didn't find it financially worth it to buy them. But I am actually planning on buying like a whole bunch of other ones, a bunch of his albums in a couple weeks. So, but yeah. Wait, any other questions on mine, or?
I was a little surprised to see that you liked Igloo Ghost, because I knew you liked it before we did this chat, but
yeah,
I think you mentioned it at some point, or like sent me a text.
I probably did.
And I don't know, like it seemed it really is.
It's insane.
Quite an experience. Like,
yeah.
From the moment. So our friend Simon, he posted about it. And it's just one of those albums where right off the bat I'm like, okay, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
So first of all, it's called Igloo Ghost Neo Wax Bloom
with a line over the O.
With a line over the, and I'm like, okay, that's a weird title. Then I look at the cover.
Oh my god, the cover is so stupid.
Some type of acid trip cartoon with like witches, except they're drawn as like shapes, not really like actual characters. And I was just like,
have you seen the concept for it?
No.
That like it's apparently like about like this whole story he's trying to tell through this music, and I'm like, okay, man, just like you do you, man. Yeah.
But then of course the music, I think it's mainly, let me look it up, because I think Rate Your Music had like a shit ton of subgenres on it. But
it's like wonky.
It's wonky, just glitchy, like weird, just really bizarre. And yeah, I don't know, like it just didn't really seem like it'd be something you like. So what about it?
I think I'm always up for like some Venetian snares or something in that realm, and I really I really felt like this was like a blend of like the crazy shit that Venetian snares does mixed with like the crazy shit the Flying Lotus does.
Yeah.
But like what makes each of those artists really crazy is just combined together. And I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I just found it like it was more like it kept my attention the entire time.
It's very good.
I consider that a good thing, because most most of the music that I tried to listen to this year just did not. Like, I was bored by, like, within, like, a minute of the first track, which is really, really immature to say, but nonetheless true. I'm not against, revisiting something, but I just really wasn't impressed by, like, the majority of stuff I listened to.
Yeah.
With stuff like this that, like, like even some of the stuff that I had on my list that I was gonna put on, like Forest Swords or even like Melina, like, when I put that on, like, it just didn't catch me the same way. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna skip that for now. But like all of these albums really did catch me by surprise. Burning Ghost was going to be on the list no matter what, just because I've listened to that album probably more than any other album this year that came out this year anyway. Because if we're going to count albums that I just listened to more than anything else, like, I don't know, Faith No More's The Real Thing is probably like number one. I don't know why. That's just like been my soundtrack this year. But yeah, I'm really not surprised by a lot of your stuff. I'm surprised. Well, I'm surprised that
I'm unpredictable.
Well, no, I mean, like,
No, okay.
like I knew that, Bell Witch. I knew you were psyched about the new Bell Witch, but I didn't know that you really liked it that much.
I was very apprehensive about it because I think it was Decibel who posted an op-ed that, quote unquote, albums are too long.
Oh yeah,
and
was that for the Was that for the Prurient?
It was right after Prurient came out.
Yeah.
And then the banner image they used was Prurient, so that's obviously what they were. And then he talked about it. I think obviously if an album's not interesting and it's too long, that makes it worse. But like that's just not, to me, that's just such an unfair blanket statement to say. I think if you can make an album that's engaging over that length of time, then it's not too long. Like just because it's 2 or 3 hours long. And I think Antti Fantano made a great point when he said, people will spend, that amount of time on any number of things. It's a matter of what you choose your time doing.
Yeah.
Like, because he mentioned, an adult doesn't have that much time to do stuff. And I'm like, that's not true. People will binge, 3 episodes of a Netflix series, and that's 3 hours. And like, they see no problem with that. Obviously that's different than listening to an album, but it means that you do have the time if you want to spend to it.
Yeah.
And so I think within the metal community, that really was something, even though Bell Witch, it's only about, an hour and a half long, which is still a long album, and it's one song. But there's just something about, so they're a bass and drum duo that does Funeral Doom. And there's just something about, I love Funeral Doom because it's very melodic and evocative and emotive. It's, bands like Evoken, are really, really great. And then I think Bell Witch is probably, one of the better bands operating today. And just the what he's able to produce with his bass tone and with the riffs he writes and the way that it didn't feel like an hour and a half. I mean, it felt long, but it felt engaging, and it really did evolve in a way that didn't feel like any part of the composition was rushed. And then it evolved into some beautiful, it almost sounded like a religious eulogy at the end. There was a lot of choral vocals. It was just incredibly well written, and it caught me off guard how much I enjoyed it. Like you said, it was definitely something I was looking out for. I loved their last album, Four Phantoms. And unfortunately, so they parted ways with their drummer and vocalist after Four Phantoms, which came out in 2015, I believe. And then he actually died not long after that. So this was definitely written with recent sorrow in mind. And I think they really did channel that into their music. So I agree that I was a little surprised at how much I enjoyed it, but I think it's definitely... every year the metal industry kind of decides that there's a certain number of albums that are, these are the top of the year. And I think this year, more than other years, I agreed. Converge and Bell Witch were two of the most high rated, and I actually really enjoyed those.
How's Converge not on this list, actually? Now I think about it.
It was well, like I mentioned, I tried to do my favorite from each genre, and I put a lot of metal or metal adjacent albums on this list, and it's up there. I mean, I love the new Converge. Actually, speaking of which, the only metal album that has received a lot of praises here that I really don't get, or not. I don't want to say I don't get, but I don't.
Agree with
the new Mastodon. Like the new Mastodon has gotten a lot.
Which one?
Emperor of Sand. Not Cold Dark Place.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm really surprised that it got as much, because like it's just like it's really just fine. Like it's just okay on the whole, and then there are some songs that are like pretty bad. Especially show yourself.
Yeah, oh my god.
Like show yourself is
my god,
Foo Fighters covering Queens of the Stone Age.
I remember when they were starting to do marketing for Emperor Sand, and like the first album that came out,
Sultan's Curse.
Sultan's Curse. It was pretty
good.
The first track was I really enjoyed it, and then Show Yourself came out. Within a minute, I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. Like I ended up just not listening to it. To the entire album, because I'm like, to hear that song again would kill me.
I listened to it through once, all the way through, and I just, like, people were saying this is a perfect, feels like the bridge between their old sound and Crack the Sky and stuff like that. And to me, it felt kind of like a less good version, like not a bad version, just a less good version of everything they'd done. There was their typical like sludgy kind of approach, but it just wasn't done as well. Then there were the poppier songs which really weren't done as well. Like I think Show Yourself was one of the worst songs they've ever written. And then the proggier elements just again weren't as well composed. I'm not sure why. I think it's just because it's a Mastodon record, and it's one of those things where they've kind of we see this a lot. I mean, like for example, the new Morbid Angel is getting a lot of credit because they went from making this industrial rock monstrosity, and now they're back to making a death metal record. So
I forgot about that. But what did you think of that? I mean, it didn't make the list, but
so I wrote. This is probably, I think I wrote like almost a 2,000 word review for Heavy Blog because I had a lot to say about it. I think that if Elude never, because we saw this where they obviously made a lot of impact with Altars of Madness, and
Covenant,
then Blessed Are the Sick, and then Covenant. They really were on a roll. Domination was really well received, and then they kind of hit like a little bit of a middle ground, but not really with Domination, and then they Where's your charger, sweetie? Sorry, technical difficulties. I have to find my charger. We're very professional here.
Yep. The most professional.
I just didn't want to die on you. But anyway, they switched it up, and they got Steve Tucker, a different bassist and vocalist, on Formulas Fatal to the Flesh, which was like a reinvigorated, really fast, intense listen. And then they did some interesting stuff with Gateways to Annihilation. But then on Heretic, they kind of just hit that typical old death metal band snag, where it just was kind of an old death metal band doing what they've always done. Now we're hitting the 2000s where death metal's doing crazy shit, and there's a bunch of young bands really doing a bunch of different things with the genre. So I think if Kingdom's Disdain came out after then, people would be like, kind of like what happens with Cannibal Corpse. Is you have the typical core fans that will always like it, but in general, there's a lot of death metal fans that are like, it's another Cannibal Corpse album.
Yeah.
But since they had Morbid Angel had an atrocious album in between, this seems much better by comparison in a lot of people's eyes. It's okay. It's very much an okay death metal album. So it's
like you're like the contrast between the two is so great that people will automatically just latch on to this new one.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened with Metallica twice in their career. People, I mean,
wait, what would be what? Saint Anger to Death Magnetic, and then then Lulu into the new one.
I personally don't think Death Magnetic or Hardwired are bad albums by any means. I think Death Magnetic is better than Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think absolutely, if those albums were released on their own and you take away years upon years of disappointment, fans would not like rave about it as much as
that's definitely true.
And like I hate to like put straw man people or put like words in their mouth, but just I just don't. I tried to listen to this in a vacuum. I put aside Elude and and just tried to listen to it, and it's just okay. Like the guitar solos aren't as great, the riffs aren't as distinct, the vocals aren't really as dynamic as they have been in the past. It's just a lot of stuff that's just not as good. So yeah, Morbid Angel is my favorite death metal band. I love their stuff, but Kingdoms of Change was just it was just fine. Just in comparison to the insane amount of great death metal that's come out over the last few years, it just doesn't compare.
Yeah. Okay.
It really doesn't.
I get you. And oh wait. Oh, I wanted to know where did you find that Irreversible Entanglements album? Like, how did you find that out?
Our friend Dave Tremblay. He runs a blog called "Can This Even Be Called Music?"
Which we'll link in the description.
Yeah, and he posted about it, and I don't even know why I don't listen to everything he posts about, but it caught my eye for some reason. The fact that it was jazz poetry, but also free jazz, I thought was interesting, and then just what I love most about this is kind of the same for Father John Misty too, is these are both albums about. They're topical. They're about politics. I think Father John Misty's is a little bit more personal about his views on politics and the state of the world and whatnot. But it feels more universal. It doesn't feel specific. Like especially with the election of Trump and whatnot, we have a lot of political music that's just it will be dated very soon. After Trump leaves office, and it feels too specific and corny and just not really that impactful in the large the long term whatever. Irreversible Entanglements into a different degree, Father John Misty, felt like they made true, deep, long-standing comments on, different political issues, different existential issues and whatnot. Irreversible Entanglements specifically was focusing on race issues and whatnot. The free jazz underneath was really well performed too, and then the fact that they were able to blend those together and really get synced. What was pretty phenomenal. I found myself coming back to it again and again, and yeah, I mean it was fortuitous that I kind of latched on to just a random recommendation because Dave recommends
a
whole swath of albums every time he posts. So I just happened to pick it out and ran with it.
Yeah, his site is really good if you always are out for some recommendations for stuff that's really odd. Because I think I'm trying to remember that I've gotten recommendations from him before that I really liked, but it's been a while since I've looked on his site, so which is sort of sad because it is he does put a lot of work into what he does. I mean, he scours Bandcamp like you wouldn't believe.
It's pretty incredible how I kind of wish I had the time to do that because I mean to be perfectly honest, some of the stuff he finds I think is not great. I mean, it's definitely everything he finds is like interesting and avant-garde and like this is like it's kind of cool that they approach music this way, but some of it is just not.
Yeah, I definitely agreed. I definitely not a fan of everything that he's put out, but there have been some interesting moments. Like actually, I'm trying to remember Nakata. He was talking about this album by Nakata called Bakunovsky's Process that came out this year, and it's basically like improvised sax and Rhodes piano, but I think there's also like a lot of noise in it too. And I really like that album. Like that was actually up to be possibly on this list, but like it just sort of cut short for me because it seemed a little one dimensional. But so he does have a lot of really cool stuff.
Absolutely.
That's definitely cool because I figured you had just gone to like rate your music, like and just. But
it was interesting because I think I did see it on Rate Your Music, so I might have picked it up on my own. But this is at the end of the year when I was looking through all the different jazz albums. I was like, oh, I need to check that out, whatever. What I was surprised about is that it actually got a lot of traction. Like, for example, I think Bandcamp shouted out in their top 100. I think so. And then it was either Stereogum or Noise, whoever their jazz writer is, included it, I think, second or really high up in their top 5, which was phenomenal to see that it was getting this much attention. Because I feel like with a lot of jazz coverage, and I saw this a lot when I worked at a music company before that did classical music, primarily with new composers, is that a lot of modern jazz, and especially the establishment, jazz and classical, they really go for like old safe picks. Like for example, I think Down East magazine, I saw their picks for like top whatever this year, and almost all of them, like I think Herbie Hancock was like the best pianist for like 2017, which like cool, like Herbie Hancock's great, but like I don't think he put out an album this year, or if he did, I didn't hear about it. I mean, he might have. I might be totally wrong.
I'm trying to think, because I know that like Wayne Shorter's been active. Yeah. And so I assume maybe Herbie Hancock's been active too, but I can't really remember.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just one of those things where like obviously you can still shout out the old guard, but it's weird to when they haven't put out an album in a while, or they haven't really done as much as like a lot of younger acts, to not to kind of exclude them. So it's nice to see some sites really not only going more adventurous in like the the people, but also the genres, the different styles that they talk about. It's not just bop and vocal jazz and really safe real like sanitized stuff. They go for some experimental stuff, which is cool. That
definitely is cool. I think part of the reason that they're so, like, some of those publications are so old hat in their choosing, I think it's because I think not a lot of people follow the standard like jazz formula anymore, at least when it comes to like who they sign to. Like, you typically think of like Atlantic and you think of Blue Note, as like the two jazz labels, and there still are artists and jazz artists still signed to both of those labels, but it's just like where the real heart of jazz is now, it's moved. Especially since music's been able to become so independent because of the internet. It's just so damn widespread. Like, I mean, if you really want a good list, I know that Free Jazz Collective does musician lists every year.
They're very good.
And they always do some really, really deep picks that like I'd never heard of these guys before. It was really cool. So yeah, I mean, I get you though. Like, I think a lot of publications sort of have that like, they want to get the A-list releases down, but it makes sense. But
yeah, it's like what we just talked about with Mastodon.
Exactly.
I mean, Mastodon is a very popular band, and this is them kind of returning, because I don't think Once More Around the Sun or
The
Hunter really ranked as highly. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering, but I think they did take kind of somewhat of a critical dip.
I think
for a little bit.
Once More got really shat on, but still, I think it still wasn't it wasn't like reviled.
Yeah.
And then
now
I think
suddenly
Once More was a little better. Yeah, and then this is like
now they've shot back up with just kind of doing, and I think that's why I got so salty with or so upset with Morbid Angel, is because Decibel magazine posted a big feature this summer called The Year of Death Metal, and I was like, that's interesting. Like, it's cool that they're talking about it, because something we've been talking about for a while is that death metal is exploding, and it was literally all old bands.
Oh yeah,
all old bands who were quote unquote releasing the best album in years in their careers, which is not true for a lot of them. At best, a lot of them were just kind of doing what they were doing like fine, well. And it bothers me, and that's why it bothers me that people were giving Kingdoms to Stay by Morbid Angel a pass, is because it just, in some ways, it encourages. I mean, bands are going to do what bands are going to do. Yeah. But, like, it encourages fans to think, oh, like, this is the best death metal has to offer. And I'm not saying that's true for all fans, but, like, for, like, just kind of surface level listeners who don't really dive in as much as, you know, people like Jimmy or I, it seems like, you know, that they'll just take whatever, you know, is talked about most. They don't want to put in as much effort looking into new music, and, you know, there's so much better death metal that they could be listening to. And if they enjoy it, that's fine. But, like, I think it's I don't know. I like raising. I mean, people know there's a new Cannibal Corpse album, for example. You know, like Metal Blade does a great job promoting. They know it's there, and they can hear about it. But, like, they're not going to hear about that. You know, band on a small, like a band like Succumb on the Flenser is not going to get nearly as much exposure. So it's nice, you know, to give bands like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Fantano shouted them out in a YUNO review.
Yeah, he had the same issue where he didn't like the vocals.
Yeah,
I think he liked what was going on. He didn't like the vocals, which is fine. Yeah. I mean, it's she's definitely unique in her approach and the way that, you know, she produces it and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, but all right. Well, any last words?
No, actually, I really like that we had two very diverse lists. Just a quick shout out. I'm not familiar with all the stuff on your list, but I definitely want to do a hard second for Burning Ghosts. I remember you let me borrow the copy you have, and that's a great album.
I would suggest, out of everything on that list, give Golden Retriever a shot.
Yeah, that sounded really interesting.
I have a feeling you really like that, just because knowing how much you like minimalism. And it's much shorter than a lot of minimalist albums. So, yeah, it's really good. But all right, well, I guess that's it.
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks for a cool year, or a few months.
Yeah,
in 2017. You know, this has been fun so far, and hopefully you know, you've either never heard of these albums and get to listen to something new, or it reminds you to listen to something you enjoyed, and we're looking forward to seeing, you know, what you guys enjoyed this year, because I mean, there was a lot of great music this year. If I could have done a top 50 for this, I would have, but I had to kind of cut myself short because I was getting out of control. And pick 10.
I mean, so I could barely pick 10. So.
Yeah, we had very, very different issues.
Yeah.
So I would really love to see what you guys enjoyed.
Yeah.
So please comment.
Yeah, definitely. You know, like, subscribe, all that crap. Facebook's in the description. Twitter's in the description. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. And we have one more episode that will be happening on Christmas, and then I think that might be it for this year, and then we'll talk to you guys next year. So good talking to you.
All right,
see you.